figuring out something there.
All right, good morning, everyone. We'll call the Tuesday, August 1st board meeting to order. If you rise and join me in the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, August 1st already. Fair week in Meeker County.
We'll see how that goes.
Great Meeker County get together.
151 years this year, I believe, so.
Yes.
All right, public comment period. Do we have anybody from the public who would wish to speak this morning? It doesn't look that way, so we'll move on. I'd look for a motion or approval of the board agenda, meeting agenda.
No additions? Move to approve the agenda as printed.
Second.
All right, got a motion by Paul and a second by Beth. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Consent agenda. Andrew, would you walk us through those items, please?
Yes, today we have the July 18th board meeting minutes, social services, county and hospital accounts payable, tobacco license transfer from Eden Valley Properties to Valley & Co. Approve the 2022 Emergency Management Performance Grant. That's the consent agenda.
All right, is there any questions on the consent agenda? Any items somebody wants to talk about?
I think I got mine answered there.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda, Mr. Chair.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Oberg,
I will second that motion.
and I have a second by Commissioner Johnson. Is there any further discussion? And we have no resolutions in there. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. All right, Tim, good morning.
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 It is Meeker County Fair Week, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
If you're out there, I'm not sure which commercial building I'll be in, but I'll be in one of them. One of the pole barns, so. Good morning, my name is Tim Steiner, and I'm the Meeker County Veteran Service Officer, and, what I'd like to talk to you about today is a no-cost lease that the Hutchinson Area DAV, Chapter 37, just signed for the handicap equipment program that is operated out of the garage that's right behind the Family Service Center. And that program's been there a while, and it exists to provide equipment like wheelchairs, walkers, electric scooters, hospital beds, free of charge to Meeker County residents. As far as I know, the history of it, that was the American Legions and the VFWs in the area combined together, and it ended up in that location ultimately. The no-cost lease that you have a copy of will mitigate liability to the county and formally provide a space for the Hutchinson DAV to operate this program. The lease includes 1,044 square feet of space in the Veteran Service building garage. And there in the attachment is a diagram that shows the drawing of the building and the space that they will occupy.
All right, is there any questions for Tim?
Has County Attorney Schiefelbein reviewed the lease?
I did thoroughly.
And
I approved it and sent it back for signatures.
I think it was her idea a few years ago, so, and a good idea, so.
Will it be, this will be staff, then they will provide their own staff for this?
Correct. In the past, we had been, Veteran Service Office had been doing that, but it falls under all falls under the Hutchinson DAV. At this point, it's their program, so yes, there's, they operate with volunteers Monday through Friday at 3-hour time frames, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 a.m. to noon, and Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 3. And it is their volunteers. We're currently in a little bit of a transition period, but we're moving in that direction, and then the volunteers will be pretty much at this point effectively all under the Hutchinson DAV, or they
And
will
it's
be
posted?
effectively. What's that?
Posted those hours?
This isn't a new lease. We started this how many years ago?
The lease is new.
but the program
The
we
program
started.
is not, yes. The
They've
DAV
been
has been
operating
managing
it
it
for a
for
while
4
this
years
way.
now,
Yeah.
Okay,
and so.
It's not,
because if I needed something, the first place I would go, I would come to you, or I'd make a phone call. And
Yep. Yes, and there is actually a phone we're putting out there, so that, when we do receive those phone calls, we can direct those to the Hutchinson DAV, and they'll have access to that phone, in the garage, so.
you coordinate with those folks, and so Meeker County is still served through all of this, and
Correct, it is their program, but, yeah, the volunteers are theirs, so, yeah, it was previously through the office, so there is a transition period of time. I would anticipate that we're still gonna get a number of phone calls to our office.
Sure.
And we'll just direct them to,
but this isn't a new way of doing it. I don't want anybody to think this is something new we're starting. We'd started this 3-4
4
years
years
ago.
ago.
We just probably didn't have a lease to the DAV. But I haven't heard any complaints about the program. I think it's working fine. They have somebody out there and they give you what you need. And I think all the equipment is listed on the computer, if I recall, right? So if you can't get it here, you can get it somewhere else. That's how it was when we looked into it, Brandy, am I
So my
correct?
understanding from 2018, the
18,
reason why
that's when it
we
was.
transitioned, or 19, transitioned to this process was, one, to mitigate liability on the county, because when people were coming in to take this equipment, it was donated equipment, and the whole state of Minnesota now has access to view what equipment is listed online through the DAV program. They have a specific program that goes throughout the state, and then if Meeker County has 3 wheelchairs and Stearns County has none, someone from Stearns County could then access through the DAV program and get that wheelchair. And so it benefits all veterans throughout the state of Minnesota. However, there is the opportunity for the Meeker County residents to work through this specific program. Hutchinson has vans and through the DAV, and so this program is really just expanding on that opportunity for veterans to gain access while mitigating the liability on the county.
So if there is something that we don't have, the veteran still has the opportunity to access it through another channel.
Exactly.
Through the wider
Right,
program.
they have an
the broader.
inventory of what's where.
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
recall when we started this.
Correct.
So,
It's not a whole, it'd be a little bit of a transition as to how you access and some contact numbers and stuff, but that's really about it. The program's been functioning already, so.
very good. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the Hutchinson Area DAV Chapter 37, no cost lease.
I have a motion by Commissioner Olberg,
I'll second that.
and I have a second by Commissioner Bredesen. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Tim.
Tim?
Bill Schmalz. As long as I'm thinking of it, Phil, and you're getting comfortable.
Comfortable?
Uh-oh.
Passat 30, Manana, they're complaining about speed limit similar to Watkins. So just something to,
It's 30 miles an hour through town.
yeah, all the way out across the bridge, but
So their concern is speeding vehicles, they're not,
yeah,
not
coming in
following
and
speed
coming
limit.
out, yeah. So just something to, maybe if you can pull the cart out there or something.
That may be a candidate for something similar to Watkins.
Yep. All right.
Okay, again, Phil Schmalz, Public Works Director. A few items for your consideration this morning. The first is to consider final acceptance and payment for our 2023 contracted pavement crack sealing contract. So this is asphalt crack sealing that we did with our contractor this year. One thing to note is that actual costs came in quite a bit below what we were anticipating. Explanation on that is we pay for crack sealing by the pound. So when we estimate our crack size, it depends on the time of year. So the cracks had already shrunk a little bit by the time the contractor got out there, and any error in our estimating would be the reason for that underrun. Same cracks we were looking at, but smaller cracks.
Good problem to have, I guess.
Yeah, can we do that?
It is, as long as we get enough material in the crack, cause if you get too little, then they risk tearing in the winter when they open up again.
Mr. Chair, I move for final acceptance and payment for the 2023 contracted pavement crack sealing contract.
I have a motion by Commissioner Bredesen,
I will second that motion.
and I have a second by Commissioner Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the crack seal final payment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Second item I have for you is to consider authorizing Public Works to set a letting date for SAP 047614-023. It's a reconstruction on CASA 14 in the city of Darwin. If you think back to January, each year we'll do an authorization for letting for all of our projects. This is a project that came to us kind of late in the game. The city of Darwin wants to do a reconstruct and maybe start this fall yet on 14. So I request you authorize us to set a letting date for the project.
Mr. Chair, I move to authorize Public Works to set a letting date for SAP 047-614-023.
I have a motion by Commissioner Oberg.
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Johnson. Is there any further discussion?
Only a
On
comment,
Darwin.
that's quite a chunk of money for the city of Darwin to,
It is. My understanding is they were successful in accessing, I think it'd be a loan program. A lot of cities use it. I don't know the details of it. But yeah, the majority of the costs would be the cities for their
Yeah.
underground utilities and the width in excess of 24 feet. That all the city costs.
that's right, that whole stretch through there is quite a bit wider, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, any further discussion or questions on the Darwin project? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Third item I have for you is to consider a joint powers agreement with the city of Darwin for that project. So the project, a little bit about it, it goes from Grand Street on the south end of Darwin up to US Highway 12. Full reconstruct, so they're gonna remove the pavement, remove the gravel, all utilities underneath, new curb and gutter, new sidewalk, and put it back. It's a very similar agreement to what we executed with the city of Dassel. Same consultant, a different city, different road. Otherwise, the language is the same.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve a joint powers agreement with the city of Darwin for the reconstruction of CASA 14 from Kern Street to US 12 in the city of Darwin.
I have a motion by Commissioner Oberg
I'll second that.
and a second by Commissioner Bredesen. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Just a quick update on our CASA 14 reclaim project south of Darwin. Hopefully by the end of the day today, we'll have all of our first lift of pavement down, so gravel condition will be no more, which will be good, because I know the people out there using the road and living on the road are tired of driving on gravel and working with the dust. So, excited for that.
The culvert, yeah.
Culvert crossing is scheduled to start Monday of next week. And at that point, you will not be able to utilize that crossing at all, so anybody trying to get north or south of the culvert crossing between the lakes will have to stay on their side.
Did this project happen in the right order, or,
No,
cause somebody asked me, I said, I think the culvert was back ordered,
the
right?
culvert was supposed to go in last fall, that was our goal.
That's what I thought.
And we couldn't get materials until July and now into August. There's a gas line that Excel needs to relocate before the culvert can go in, that's why the culvert got pushed another
Okay.
week and a half recently.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I knew there was something with materials.
Yeah, ideally, we put the culvert in
Yeah.
before we pave, cause
That's
now
what
we're
I
gonna have
said.
to come back and,
Right.
there's not pavement where the pipe is now, but there's a 300-foot gap where we'll have to fill in the middle. And I expect there's gonna be settlement over the pipe that we'll have to address in the future, and you'll have joints at the start and end of the patch pavement too, that's not ideal.
So there'll be no traffic going north or south over that. Do we have kind of an estimate of time?
I would expect it to be less than 2 weeks, but I like to say 3 weeks.
Sure.
Give them a little
Weather,
room. Yep, you're gonna have delays, you're gonna have weather, things are gonna happen.
what they have done is very nice. I mean, you know, I've driven part of it just to see.
Yep.
But it definitely increased the traffic, truck traffic on 9, because they had to use 9 and 18 as haul roads, I suppose.
Yep, 14 is being reclaimed and paved under traffic, but we do encourage folks to utilize 9.
It's gonna be a nice project to get done, cause it was needed. Last time I drove on it was good.
Cloud didn't join with us
Yeah,
and finish the
it is.
last part.
Yeah. That's
All
I
right.
have.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Good, thank you, Phil. Mikkel Johnson. Good morning.
Good morning. Mikkel Johnson, Human Resources Coordinator. So what I have for your consideration today is updating the Meeker County Drug and Alcohol Testing and Drug-Free Workplace Policies for both non-DOT employees and DOT. So DOT would be the CDL drivers. So obviously, with today being August 1st, this is a timely policy to bring forward. But honestly, I've been working on this for a little while. Our older policy that we currently have just needed a facelift anyway, so it was a good reason to get these updated. Basically, what these do is it updates our current policy to include more information about the use of cannabis, that it is not allowed on or off duty on the premises, you can't bring it to work. And then there's also separate policies for law enforcement as well. With the approval of recreational marijuana in Minnesota, it still is illegal federally. So that is where it comes into play with some employees. So employees that are law enforcement are still unable to use on or off duty, and then also CDL drivers as well. So it still has all of the same information about testing, random testing. It still has information about reasonable suspicion within it because we follow the statute in regards to that. But it expands on some of the definitions, expands on some of the language, and then like I said, it added more information about the actual use of marijuana and what is allowed and not allowed in regards to employment. In addition to this, I'm going to do a brief presentation to employees on Friday about this as well, and then we're also having supervisors trained on reasonable suspicion as well, so that we have those things covered. I've also created a new reasonable suspicion checklist as well, because that is what will help us determine whether or not we can send someone for testing if we think that they have an impairment while they're at work. So some of the things that we would be looking for under that would be appearance, so different physical things that we can notice, speech patterns, behavior, awareness, movement, odor, and so some of those are the things that we would be looking for if we suspect that somebody is possibly impaired while they're at work. What would happen is we would have 2 people fill out the reasonable suspicion checklist, and if we determine that they need to be sent for testing, then we would take them to be tested. Most of the time, for other concerns, we would be doing it on a case-by-case basis. We would be focusing on behaviors and what we're seeing, and investigating those things as well if we had any concerns with employees.
Is that what you do now for alcohol, basically, too?
Yes, yep.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair, move to approve the updated Meeker County drug and alcohol testing and drug-free workplace policy for non-commercial drivers and for commercial drivers.
I have a motion by Commissioner Johnson,
I'll second that.
and I have a second by Commissioner Bredesen. Is there any further discussion? I just have a question. I have a feeling, and maybe with Bill in the room and Brandy, I mean, this might be a little bit of a fluid document because there's a lot of things we don't know and don't have clear as far as how laws are gonna be enforced and evaluation, and
The one thing that definitely could possibly be fluid is that right now for drug and alcohol testing for CDL, you can't have any marijuana at all. The hard part with that testing is that depending on how long ago that someone possibly had some, it can stay in their system for a while. So there isn't really a way to test when they possibly
Proximity.
used. Something that might be looked at is doing more of like a saliva test that has certain particles in it. And then it would be, you can only have certain number of particles. That is one thing that I've been hearing is a potential thing in the future. I don't know whether that would happen or not, but then we would update depending on that.
Okay.
And we do some random testings now and then, just surprise.
With CDL carriers, yes.
How about our general employee population?
No, just CDLs, yeah. Yeah, and that's common, to be honest, that's common throughout counties.
Anything else? I'd look for a motion.
Paul made the
Oh,
motion.
we did that. We just
have
got,
a-
I'm
And a
sorry.
second, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we're good, Paul and Julie, I got you.
Yeah, we're just about.
All in favor of the updated Meeker County drug and alcohol testing policy, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mikkel. Andrew,
I'm actually gonna turn it over to Emily Wood to run us through this item.
all right, good morning.
Morning.
All right, so as Andrew said, I'm Emily Wood. I'm an attorney at Wood and Rue, and I'm working with Brandy and Andrew on this project. We were approached by Larry Jensen's law office. Some of his clients performed a survey of their property on Highway 4. And upon that survey being completed, they realized that their shed encroached on the county property that is adjoining their property. So the southeast corner of their shed is encroaching by a few feet. So they came to us with a proposal of a deed exchange where the county would give them the southeast corner of their shed, and in exchange, the private party would give the county a deed for the equivalent acreage out of the wooded areas adjoining the county property. So I always try to encourage people to get surveys before you build for this
First
very
would be
reason.
better.
Yeah, it's cheaper if you do it that way. So that's the proposal through this resolution that's been drafted today. It is stating that Paul and Nancy Goddards is the private party on this matter. They would be offering a deed to Meeker County in exchange for Meeker County deeding to the Goddards as the southeast corner of their shed. And in addition to that, the Goddardses are willing to cover my legal fees on this. They will pay for the split costs. Since this is a parcel split, there will be additional administrative costs attached to that as well, and the recording costs. So essentially, the whole goal here is that the county would be willing to do a deed exchange, but the county wouldn't be out of pocket for this issue.
So no financial cost to the county.
Correct.
And I take it they found this, cause their property's up for sale, I know that.
I believe so,
Yeah.
yes.
Brandy? you have an
Yeah, when
opinion?
I received a phone call on this issue, I wanted to discourage, landowners to building on county property without getting a survey, and so I just didn't want this to be a habit, and so I didn't feel it was in our best interest to pay for any sort of fees or costs, and I think the private party was more than willing to, as this was a mistake and error, they were willing to do that, and so I think, it is a fair resolution to fix it.
Okay.
And-
I would agree.
I mean, I take it this is one of them where if you don't, you can take your garage down. I mean, if you went
mean, we
that
wouldn't wanna
far.
do that.
No, I know.
It would be.
But I mean, that's the consequence of not,
Well, people
Checking your
shouldn't
property.
build or buy without a survey, obviously.
no, I'm just saying that if you had the wrong two parties,
They always think a survey costs a lot of money till these things happen, and then
Yeah.
a survey perhaps would have been cheaper. I'm not saying you charge.
It's a much cheaper alternative to
Yeah.
tearing down and rebuilding
I
if
would
it comes
agree,
to
so.
it.
Does a building permit not identify or
Require a
find
survey?
things like this?
Unless there's a survey that's done as part of the permit,
Then,
then it wouldn't. And we're not always gonna require a survey for every type of permit, so.
I see,
So they thought, they thought that the line was here and it was actually.
and it was over there.
So, yeah. It's a fairly common problem, unfortunately.
Mr.
Yep.
Chair, I move
Yes.
to approve a resolution authorizing a deed exchange regarding 35285 Minnesota Highway 4, Grove City.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Bredesen.
I will second that motion.
I have a second by Commissioner Johnson. Is there any further discussion on the resolution? Hearing none, Corey, would you take the roll, please?
Commissioner Ober,
yes,
Commissioner Bredesen,
Yes,
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Yes. All right, resolution passes. That's, should be all you need, right?
So much.
thank you.
All right, thanks, Emily.
You're right on
And
time. Look
we
at that.
got a-
Wow.
They're coming in.
You know, that right there is jinxing it, right there.
yeah.
I've got,
Honest
on
to
time.
goodness, I don't know why anybody would say that. See, there's what I'm
You're mad
saying.
at
all right,
Well, yeah, last time it was a picture, now it's this.
we need a motion to,
We do need a motion to go into the public
yeah.
hearing.
So I'll look for a motion to recess as county board and convene as county ditch authority.
Mr. Chair, I so move.
I have a motion by Commissioner Bredesen,
Second.
second by Commissioner Johnson. Is there any further discussion?
Need a bigger.
Hearing none, all in favor of going from county board to ditch authority, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
And then, Mr. Chair, there's an agenda in your packet for the public.
Yep, I've got my script here. See if I can follow it, that'll be the challenge. Morning, Kale.
Good morning.
All right, we are all ready to go on this, County Ditch 49. And I will open and I will let, Kale kinda run us through the purpose of the hearing as he gets settled here.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. As you know, you're seated here today in your capacity as the Public Drainage Authority for County Ditch 49, Meeker County Ditch 49. The Drainage Authority received a petition from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service seeking to undertake a project that they're calling locally the Butler Lake Restoration Project. The project includes restoring Butler Lake back into a shallow lake, which is the condition it was likely in before County Ditch 49 was established. To do that, the petitioners are proposing to impound part of County Ditch 49 drainage system waters back into Butler Lake, so that County Ditch 49 would outlet into the restored lake bed, and then they would construct a water control structure to maintain the level of that lake bed. The overflow waters from that structure would go back into County Ditch 49. You're gonna hear a presentation just exactly how that will work here in a moment as part of today's hearing. The drainage code allows for such a petition like this to be filed under Minnesota Statutes 103E.227. And it states that when the petitioner is a federal agency, no bond is required. And so in this case, just a petition was filed, we have no bond. But in that petition, the petitioners have agreed through their project sponsor, who is Ducks Unlimited, who they're working with on this project, to be responsible for all of these preceding costs. In addition, the petitioners have made a request to the board for a contribution of some drainage system funds, which the drainage code does allow them to do if they establish some benefit to the drainage system, or one of those benefits could be, which applies in this case, avoiding repair costs that the system would otherwise have to obligate itself to. So part of the proposed project you're about to hear about today is that a portion of County Ditch 49 would be abandoned, and the drainage system would no longer be responsible to maintain that portion. That'll be under the lake bed. And then a part of the existing system will be rerouted to accommodate the project. That abandoned tile and that rerouted tile, of course, will be new tile paid for by the petitioner and Ducks Unlimited as part of the project. That is a savings to the drainage system, and so the petitioners have made a request to you that some of those avoided repair costs be contributed towards some of the costs of these proceedings. Specifically, what they've asked is that the cost to negotiate and acquire the right-of-way for the rerouted portions of the ditch system be paid for through the drainage system funds. And we'll talk a little bit in kind of an estimate of what we think that amount might be. The drainage code says that once this petition is filed, then the board's job is to appoint an engineer to investigate the project. And the point of the engineer's investigation is to make sure that the proposed project, once constructed, will not cause any harm to the landowners who are benefited by County Ditch 49. So that all of those property rights that attached when this drainage system was established are protected. So the board received the petition and appointed Joe Lewis with Houston Engineering. He did his investigation and he filed a report for the board. That report is in your packet. It's also been made available to the public for public inspection. And that report was referenced in the hearing notice for today so that members of the public knew that that report existed and they could review it and inspect it. As part of the hearing today, you'll hear from Mr. Lewis and he will discuss with you his findings and his conclusions. Once we've had a chance to hear from the petitioners, once we've had a chance to hear from Mr. Lewis today, then this is a public hearing where you'll need to open the floor for public comments and take and consider any public comments that are made as part of your decision. After there's been an opportunity for anybody who wishes to make a public comment to do so, the board will close the public comments and then we'll have some board deliberation. The statute says that the board, if it finds two things. One, that the project is of public or private benefit, and two, that the project will not impair the utility of the drainage system or deprive the benefited landowners of County Ditch 49 from that benefit. If you find that those two things exist, then the board is to approve that project. And so after deliberation, we'll talk about the evidence that was received. If there is some questions that need to be further investigated, the board can continue this hearing and direct that those things be investigated. Or if based on the evidence, the board is ready to either deny the petition or grant the petition, we'll be prepared to talk about either of those things today. With that, Mr. Chair, that's my overview of the process. Do you or any of the board members have questions for me?
And I take it you pretty much ran through my script that I was supposed to. I got you ahead of me a little bit there, but,
I'm sorry, I
I can-
assumed that you were maybe saying we're gonna skip the script today, so. But we
I can
jump back into
read it.
No problem.
I can just run through it as long as everybody's here.
That sounds great.
I'd like to welcome everyone here today to this public hearing. Under consideration at today's public hearing is a petition of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to impound, reroute, and divert drainage system waters on Meeker County Ditch 49 in sections 10 and 11 of Acton Township in Meeker County. The board's consideration of this request is governed by Minnesota statute sections 103E.227. Section 103E.227 allows a person to petition to impound, reroute, or divert drainage system waters for beneficial use. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the petitioner an opportunity to present its project, to review the engineer's investigation and report of the findings, and receive comment from those likely affected by the proposed action. This is an evidentiary proceeding and notes are being taken to preserve the record. The order of business for this hearing will be as follows. First, Mr. Van Bruggen, the Drainage Authority's attorney, will explain the process which has brought us to this public hearing and the purpose of this hearing. Following Mr. Van Bruggen, Ms. Locke, the Meeker County Auditor, will submit for the record the evidence of notice provided for today's hearing. Following Mrs. Locke, we will provide an opportunity for representatives of the petitioner to present on the proposed restoration of the Butler Lake project. Following a presentation by the petitioner, professional engineer Joe Lewis of Houston Engineering Incorporated, the project engineering designated by the Drainage Authority to investigate the proposed installation, will present a report of his findings. Following Mr. Lewis's presentation, I will open the hearing for public comment. The board would like to hear your comments on the proposed action and any information relevant to that purpose. If you would like to make a comment when the public comment period is opened, please come up to the podium. And when I recognize you, please state your name and address for the record, so we have that written down. And it will also be helpful if you could identify the property that is affected by the proposed project. If you have a specific question concerning the project proceedings, we may ask Mr. Van Bruggen, Mr. Lewis, or a staff member to respond. If you have anything in writing you wish to submit, you can provide it to me during the public comment period. Would any of the board members wish to offer any further remarks before we begin? All right. Cale, do you have anything to add?
Unless you want me to say my piece again.
No.
Highly doubt it, so.
We got the cart ahead of the horse there, or I did a little bit, so. All right, does anybody have any questions for Cale of the board here?
Not yet.
Okay, all right,
I'm prepared.
Yeah,
keep
good.
moving. Any questions for Barb?
Mr. Chair, we'll have Ms. Locke come up and submit the notice requirements for the record.
All right, sounds good.
Barb Black, County Auditor. So the notice for this particular hearing was mailed to all the individuals on the system. We posted it in our lobby. We emailed each of the commissioners and each of the petitioners. We also use our county webpage for public notices, and we published in the newspaper on July 26th. Thank you.
Barb, roughly how many people are at?
There's about 25 notices, and then the
Okay.
emails and et cetera for commissioners and others, so there's about 25 landowners.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anybody have any questions for Barb? All right. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, gentlemen. Are there any representatives of the petitioner who would like to discuss or comment on the project?
I'm Scott Gloop, a project leader for the Litchfield office, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. You all know me. I thought I'd provide just a little bit of background. Several of the current commissioners on the board weren't present when we presented the initial easement that we purchased from 5 of the landowners in the basin. So I thought I'd give a little background on that.
When was that, Scott? Do you
That would have
remember?
been probably 5 years ago, I don't recall.
Okay,
But we had worked with several of the landowners for a number of years that were interested in restoring Butler Lake. And it took a while to get this done, but we finally worked with all of them to get easements in place, Fish and Wildlife Service easements in place on portions of their property, which allowed the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to partially restore Butler Lake. And as you know, as part of that process, we brought those easements in front of the board at the time. And we, at that time, explained the intent of this easement. These easements were to partially restore Butler Lake, that the landowners were aware of that. We had discussed at that time approximate elevations that we were trying to shoot for. We can't fully restore the lake. It was much, much larger originally, and it would flood, roads and potential building sites. So we chose an elevation that worked well, that allowed any drainage that's coming into the lake to continue to function, and we were in agreement with the landowners at the time. That was all fully disclosed when we first brought this to the board to purchase those easements. So I just thought I'd provide a little bit of the background, because this goes back a ways. COVID hit, engineering takes a while to do these things. Also present are two representatives from Ducks Unlimited. They are who we work with to do the engineering and design work. They specialize in that, so we don't. So any questions that come up today relating to the engineering and design work and how the project's gonna work, I'm gonna defer to them. I don't do that. I just get myself in trouble if I tried to speak towards that. So I'm available for any questions that might come up that aren't related to the design and engineering work of this project.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Scott at this point?
Not at this time.
All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, Houston Engineering, Joel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You can just click through.
So they're embedded in this?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've prepared a few slides here just to summarize the engineer's report that was provided to the Drainage Authority. Nothing too in-depth here. That is a relatively brief report being 4 or 5 pages long. So the project again, Acton Township, approximately 1.5 miles south of Grove City. County Ditch 49 itself consists of a main trunk and 2 laterals. According to the historic records available for the system, it has a approximately 800-acre drainage area, and the outlet is into Grove Creek, which is downstream of Long Lake, and that is just to the east of the system. So the proposed modifications are listed here, and I have a following slide here that shows it on a map. Might be a little easier to follow on that, but as summarized by Kale and his introduction of the project, there are several portions of the 49 system being abandoned, a portion being replaced below Butler Lake or downstream of Butler Lake, and there is actually one portion being replaced upstream of Butler Lake, and that is to raise the outlet elevation into Butler Lake to not impact the drainage ability for that upstream portion. So here's the figure, the map figure. So on the east, the red line is the approximate location of the proposed replacement of 3,000 feet of main trunk tile that will continue to serve as an outlet for now the restored Butler Lake. That is a 24-inch pipe. It is being realigned to do a couple of things. One is to avoid the wooded areas and the clearing that would come along with that. And that is a proposed feature or design element by the petitioner, and that's included in their construction plans that they've provided along with the petition. The darker gray line there parallels that red line just a little bit to the south for the most of its length. You see that it will outlet into Grove Creek further downstream. I think that's on the order of 1,000 feet, 800 feet further north. So that's not going to be an issue in terms of the drainage impact. It's still going to be able to function as it did prior to the project. In the center of the figure, you see the label for the outlet control structure. So that outlet control structure is a concrete structure with some stop logs and other features to control water levels within the basin. And that will outlet connect to the red line, the new 24-inch pipe that is proposed to be replaced as part of this project. The gray dashed lines represent the portions of the main trunk, lateral 1 and lateral 2, that are to be abandoned formally by the Drainage Authority. So those extend to the west and then to the south and to the north. The green line to the west of the yellow shaded area, which represents a approximate basin footprint of Butler Lake, that green segment will be the portion that will be replaced and relayed at a flatter slope an outlet at a higher elevation into the basin so that the drainage of that main trunk upstream of Butler Lake is not impacted. So that can be done by flattening the slope, but increasing diameter to maintain that original capacity. And then the blue portions that are further west and north and south for lateral 1, the main trunk, and lateral 2, those will be unaltered. Okay, and I will note that through the petitioners, work out there for the design and working with landowners. Lateral 2, I don't think there was any really evidence of lateral 2 found out there in the field. And then lateral 1, I think there was some question about which tile is actually the public drainage system. And the petitioner is proposing to, where they have discovered tile specifically up on lateral 1, there will be some realignment of private drainage tile, the outlet at higher elevations, like they are proposing to on the main trunk. So, and we have a item here within our engineer's report that just recommends that there's a requirement on the petitioner that should additional tiles be discovered during construction of the project or following construction of the project, that they provide a plan and work to again limit any drainage impact on the other drainage infrastructure out there near the CD49 system. In terms of the hydrology and water levels within inside of Butler Lake Basin, I'll just summarize a few quick numbers here, but the normal water elevation is proposed to be 1176.00. Okay, and the upstream drainage, the tile that outlets into the system above Butler Lake, those will be outletting at elevations a half a foot or higher above the normal water level. And the 2-year proposed peak flood elevation is 1176.4. So it would be at least 2 years or more before those outlets are see any water. So that's really consistent with the design of an agricultural drainage system. We see that what they've proposed here is adequate to maintain the drainage for those upstream areas. So the project benefits, which we're required to address within the engineer's report, is we do see an increase in permanent and temporary storage of that runoff volume in the Butler Lake drainage area, and that has hydrologic and water quality benefits. I think that's pretty straightforward. It attenuates, stores water to lessen peak flows downstream and provides some water quality treatment in there, in addition to the wildlife habitat and ecological improvements associated with the project. And then from the drainage system benefits, there is that replacement of 3,000 feet of tile downstream of Butler Lake and then 800 feet upstream of Butler Lake. To my knowledge, those are that's original tile installed in approximately 1919, so it's 100 years old. So replacement of that with the new tile is going to be a good thing, a project benefit to the drainage system. And the recommendation is really consists of the project maintaining the drainage for the benefiting property owners upstream, and it has those hydrologic, water quality, and wildlife habitat benefits. And as I just said, the project repairs some pretty old tile, replaces pretty old tile, being a cost savings for future maintenance on the system. A few other items, recommended for consideration of the board as they consider this petition. That the petitioner is responsible for obtaining permits and property rights, as was previously discussed already, and that the petitioner takes steps to ensure that they are identifying all lateral connections to the tile, so that when these segments are replaced, those connections are made. One way to do that is through televising of the existing tile to visually see those locations. And the third bullet, if additional lateral tile is discovered, for the petitioner to provide some means to preserve that drainage for the upstream areas for those locations not already identified and shown on the plans. And then maintenance agreements that the consider how those are to be structured, if that's not yet been done already, and who's responsible for maintaining, the replaced tile and the outlet control structure. And lastly, that the petitioner provide record drawings of the constructed project, and then, do a formal acceptance of the project at the completion of the project. That is, the end of my summary of the engineer's report.
All right, does any board member have any questions for Joe?
So I just want to be very clear on this. What's the elevation of Long Lake? And I want to know there's no impact to Long Lake, correct?
Correct. The project outlets downstream of Long Lake. So Grove Creek flows to the north. So there would be no additional water to Long Lake.
Okay.
Who owns the land currently? Is it US Fish? Who owns the property?
Do you want me to go up there?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know who to direct that at, but Scott, come on up.
So are you,
While Scott prepares to do that, if the board looks in its packet at the exhibit A and post findings, there's a table that identifies the property owners by parcel number and legal description. It might help us as he goes through this.
Okay.
so if your question is who owns the property of where Butler Lake will be restored?
Yeah, kind of, is there multiple owners
There's 5
involved?
different owners
Okay.
that we purchased easements from.
Okay,
So
Okay.
we don't own any of it in fee
Okay,
title.
I
It's
just-
all private land,
okay, that's,
yes.
and overall, the footprint of this property, how many acres roughly are we impacting?
60,
60, okay, all right, I just wanted some general,
sure.
so 60 acres. About 5 different easements, all right. All right. Anybody have any other questions for Scott or for Joel?
I realize that a farmer wants quick drainage to save a crop. So will this project slow the drainage process for any of the private landowners to their detriment?
Let you take that.
Yeah, so that was a major, component of our review on the engineer's report. By the actions that they've laid out in their construction plans and details, they are going to maintain the drainage capacity for those lands upstream of the project area. The lands impacted by the project are within the conservation easement.
Joe, on lateral 1, is that, where the blue ends, is that open ditch, or is that?
That is,
that
the dash
portion
line,
there?
is open channel ditch.
Okay.
The system was originally established as tile. So with a, lack of clear record on any modifications to lateral 1 or the rest of the system, I would speculate that the tile of lateral 1 was at a point in time in the past removed and excavated into an open channel. There was some tile that outlets into that gray dashed line, which is open channel ditch. And that tile, maybe lateral 1, or it may be private drainage systems. Those are to be realigned, a shorter segment, maybe 300 to 500 feet, and again flattened so that it daylights at an elevation above the normal water pool of Butler Lake. And in fact, I think it's 1 or 2 feet above that normal water pool. So it's a fair amount higher than the water levels of the basin. So I don't expect there to be any adverse impact on that lateral 1 drainage area.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if the project is approved, one of the conditions is that the rerouted portions, those landowners grant the drainage authority easement for the realignment. Because when we go through 103E process, we acquire that right away, but in this 227 statute, there is no appointment of viewers, award of damages, acquisition of right of way. So if the project is granted, and it's contingent on 3 landowners impacted by the realignment granting the drainage authority the right of way it needs for that realignment, that would on that property with level one clear up that record. So that if there was to be a question down the road of, is it tile, is it ditch? You know, if this were granted, that would intervene and make a clear record of what type of system the drainage authority has there.
All right. Scott?
And I might address Commissioner Bredeson's question. Brian Mon, right next to you, is the most immediate impacted landowner that owns all that land just to the west. And we've worked closely with him on the design of this. And if, you know, he's the one that's would potentially be impacted. So you might, you know, he may have.
Yeah, we'll let everybody speak here in a minute. The only other question I would have is, I know things look great on paper, but if for some reason functionality don't pan out, is there recourse or what is the plan in case, you know, the X's and O's don't work out and now we got water backed up into somebody else's property in the future? And do those landowners have any, is there any clause in here that US Fish or whomever will come back and make this project function properly if it's not functioning properly? What do we, if we have problems down the road, how will they be addressed?
Thanks, I can give an initial response and I'll defer to the petitioners to expand if they choose to, but I think they've done a fairly thorough job identifying the drainage that is potentially impacted by the project. I also, recognize that many of the potentially impacted parties are providing an easement or have provided an easement. So I think in that way, there's less of a chance of unforeseen impacts. Further upstream on lateral 2 in the main chunk and lateral 1, there is some, elevation gain as you move away from the Butler Lake Basin, such that, a raised water level in Butler Lake, again, has a smaller opportunity for those unforeseen impacts.
So I mean, I get it, we're trying to design a system, but things don't always turn out the way we plan. So I just wanted, everybody in the landowner impacted by this has had that discussion, or this?
Yeah, I'll let the petitioner to
Okay, all right.
follow up my response if they choose.
Scott?
Well, this again gets into engineering design.
Sure.
So
sure.
I'm
not
just
picking
am
on
gonna
anybody.
trust the folks that did this. As far as the landowners go, the easement, we have that right now to flood that land.
Sure.
We've come to this agreement on the elevation. So if the drainage authority is going to maintain control of this afterwards, not us. It's gonna be the drainage authority that would take care of the maintenance and that kind of thing. So, I'm not sure how to respond to that, because if something, for instance, I'll give you an example, the water control structure plugs for some reason, or beaver gets into it.
Sure.
Then the drainage authority would be responsible for maintaining that. So there could be a temporary impact. All of this land around there now is cannot be row crop farmed. We have easements on it to protect it as grassland. So the potential impacts beyond that are pretty small, other than that main trunk line that we're replacing. And again, Mr. Mon would be the most impacted by that.
Okay. No, I just wanna make sure we
So-
ask the questions now,
Yeah.
because fixing them later is,
I can add to that too, when, Mr. Condon, your drainage inspector, and the petitioners and their partners, Ducks Unlimited, asked to do an initial call with me, what I've seen most commonly in projects like this is that control structure is primarily maintained and controlled by the project proponents. and I make sure that the Drainage Authority has a finding in its order saying that we have the right to notify when that needs to be modified or changed to address your very concern. And if they don't, we have the ability to go in, make the modification, and then assess costs. One of my concerns with this project early on was if it's a landowner without control, it's hard to assess costs when there's no underlying landowner. But the project proponents from the get-go had proposed that that control structure, although it'll be constructed by these project proponents on their dime, is gonna remain under the jurisdiction and control of the Drainage Authority. So one of the ways that we can address that is because we control that control structure at the end of the day.
Okay, and I just wanna make sure we're addressing potential problems down the road, not that there will be any. But is that control structure adjustable, or is it fixed?
It will be, it will be adjustable. We would have the right to do drawdowns.
Sure.
We
that's what
intend to keep it at full
Yeah,
pool level,
yep,
generally operating, but you know, as you may or may not know, sometimes it's good to do drawdowns to
Yep,
make wetlands healthier long-term. So we have that right to draw it down, but no one else would, you know,
Okay.
to draw it down below that level.
Okay.
If that were to ever come up, you know, if, for instance, needs drawdown for some maintenance reason or something, of course, you know, we'd work with that,
Okay,
but
all right, no, I just wanna make sure we're looking out for issues that could arise down the road, so.
Mr. Chair, I have some questions. maybe?
Go ahead, yes, Julie?
I'm an old school teacher and I like to point to things, I like visual aids. Mr. Mon, you own this piece?
Correct.
Who owns this piece? Is that Larry?
My mother-in-law does.
Okay, and then is this a separate piece or is this all one right here? Who owns this piece?
Two different.
Separate.
It is two separate landowners? Are they represented here today?
Martha,
I own the triangle there.
This piece?
Yes.
Okay, you own this piece and then there's a fourth
Darren Grimsgard.
and not present today. Okay, so there are four individuals involved here. Is this?
Five.
Five.
That triangle down below.
Five.
There's a triangle down below in the middle.
And this is a separate piece as well?
Yeah, Tyler.
So there are five.
Yeah.
Five people involved here. Is this piece of property in the greenish color, is this dry now? Or is there water here?
It's wetland right now. It's wetland.
Well, now because of
Right now,
the.
because of the drought.
Normally there's water,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
3 years of dry weather, but
Usually
it's
wet.
still considered a wetland.
Yeah, I would say normally it's probably considered, I would say seasonally flooded, but it's wet where, you know, it's wetland all the time.
How is this land classified as far as for taxes?
I-
It's non-productive, it's not recreational, it's, maybe that's a hard
At best
question.
recreational.
Okay,
It's been meandered land.
Oh, yeah.
The whole lake bottom was meandered land until about 4 years ago when Mike picked it up and we're paying taxes on it.
so will that taxable classification change then with these proposed changes?
Commissioner Bredesen, there's no petition at this time to change anything on the County Ditch 49 special assessment. And I can't speak to how the tax assessor for the ad valorem general property tax would react to this.
So I'm curious how the tax would change. If we approve this, will landowners then be taxed at a greater value for that property?
I would guess, Julie, it wouldn't change much, being the Fish and Wildlife already has the wetland easement on there, and it has for probably 5 years. So I would guess that really wouldn't change much. Just my 2 cents on it, being they've already got an easement on the property.
if I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, portions of that prior to this project were considered meandered and they weren't being assessed taxes. In order for us to purchase an easement on the property, that designation had to be changed away from meandered. Therefore, they went back on the tax rolls. Because we can't purchase an easement on meandered land. Now, as far as future assessments, I'm not gonna be able to respond to that, but likely they would not change, cause of, as I said, it's currently mostly wetland, and now we have a perpetual easement on it that protects it from farming or development or anything like that, so.
Because we're going to be adding water to this, so of course that will definitely make it non-agriculture productive.
It'll be more productive, in my view,
Well,
for
more-
conservation
yeah,
and
yeah.
wildlife
But
and
it take a
benefits to
different-
society,
A
yes.
different classification instead of row crops, you know.
That designation's already been changed.
Yeah, he said
And,
there's
and
no-
as I said, portions of it weren't even on the tax base and now are because it needed to be changed in order for us to purchase the easement.
Reclassification of that, okay.
Correct?
Barb? I'll let
We
Barb-
looked up a couple of the parcels that are here, and they are taxed on the wasteland and rural vacant, and so those are lower tax base assessments.
Okay.
And
So-
I might add, we need to change the terminology away from wasteland. That certainly is not.
So, perspective, yeah. Look here.
Here for another day, Scott.
Yeah, I know, but I gotta get that in. I do that every time I hear that reference.
So the footprint that's represented there at Butler Lake right now, we don't really expect that to change. That's current, this picture right here is current footprint of Butler Lake. You don't really expect that to grow a whole lot in this project. You're just gonna raise water level. Have I missed it? How high, how much water do you intend? What level are we adding, a foot? With the control structure, I mean, from where a normal year to where the control structure is, how much of water are we adding?
Well, again, that's probably in the design work. You could look at the current invert of where, that's been manipulated so much over the years, and the current tile goes through a bunch of trees and is failing. So the tile is not working well now, and when you get a big runoff event, that bumps way up for quite a while, till it can slowly get out. So, that's a hard one to answer. I don't know.
So that yellow area that's shaded, that's approximately 1176, the shape of the normal water level pool. And I think the invert or the outlet of the tile is 2 to 3 feet below that 1176 elevation. So generally there's 2 to 3 feet of depth in the deepest parts of the basin.
Okay, all right.
Did Fish and Wildlife initiate this project?
No, landowners did.
Landowners
They came to us.
Okay.
Well, not all of them. Some of them did, and then we initiated conversations and presented it to some of the others.
10 years ago, at least.
This was a
Okay.
few years back.
Yeah, we've been working on this for over 10 years.
Okay.
Darren, when did it start? Over 10 years ago, I believe.
All right, anybody else? Otherwise, we'll move on and let the landowners comment or the public. All right. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Joel. Is there anyone here who would care to speak on the project? Landowners? Go ahead, come on up. Please identify yourself.
Roger Larson,
All right,
26298 Highway 4, Grove City. The thing I wanna know is, I'm not one of the 5, but yet it's gonna be cutting across my pasture, this rerouting. I wanna know, I don't know what the stipulations are, I wanna make sure my fence get fixed and how much of a mess it's gonna make on my land. I guess
Alright.
Or the
that's.
upstream.
who's,
Or the upstream, the green.
Where the green
We're the green,
okay.
That here?
Yep.
That's.
Is
Right
this
there.
going to be open ditch or tile?
it's gonna be tile.
This will be tile. So they'll lay.
That's all my pasture and I have fence on both ends of it, I'm just wanna make sure my fence is gonna be fixed.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if the project is, petition is approved, one of the proposed conditions that I have in the draft order is that it's contingent on 3 landowners, which would include Mr. Larson, granting an easement for that reroute, because that easement needs to be granted in order for the drainage authority to retain jurisdiction over that tile. So I've made a note that that easement document needs to address repair and replacement of fence. The standard terms that I use in easements for these types of projects would require that the topsoil be removed, stored, the tile be constructed, and that topsoil be replaced back on top of the tile in order to address productivity, that the area be reseeded if it's currently pasture. The standard process would be that I would draft that easement, I would make sure that it's approved by the petitioners, Mr. Lewis, and also your drainage inspector. And then once from that end, there's agreement that this is an okay first draft, we'd send that to Mr. Larson to review. And of course, he'd have an opportunity to make sure it contains the rights and protections that he needs to see in order to grant it. We don't have eminent domain authority through 227. It's gotta be a negotiated process, and so Mr. Larson will control those concerns through that easement draft that we would exchange back and forth.
Do they lay tile or do they plow the tile?
So on the west side there, we're using the existing right-of-way easement to lay the tile in the same footprint of the existing county tile at a higher elevation with a upsize in capacity to maintain drainage. And Mr. Larson's comments, we're using the existing county right-of-way easement, but we would be coordinating with you to leave that site in better condition than when we showed up. So repair fences, make sure everything is clean. We work with, we have professional construction managers that work with state licensed contractors, and we make sure we're involving both the county and the local landowners in that process of our construction management to make sure you're happy with what you're seeing, because nothing is done on a project like Butler Lake without buy-in from the local landowners. So it gets us nowhere to have you disgruntled with the process and not part of it.
I think we just need to clarify this, make sure I'm on the same page. Mr. Larson has 2 properties, parcels 10 and 11. On the screen there, the last 4 digits are 2020 and then 2000. For where it says lateral 2, that is using existing right-of-way is my understanding, the blue line. But the green line where it says main trunk, it's my understanding that the existing right-of-way is through the trees and we're moving outside of the existing right-of-way to go around the trees, is that right?
No,
It's in the trees.
It's not a reroute portion.
So even the green part is
green is-
existing right-of-way?
Yep.
Okay,
We're gonna take the existing tile up and then relay it in the same channel.
okay.
And that's going from a 20 to a 24, is that correct?
I think it's a 12 to a 15 on that.
Yeah.
Downstream
Is
is,
that a 20-inch tile that comes
no,
out?
that's 12.
It's only 12?
I believe.
It is, yeah.
It's 12 in the field anyway.
Yep.
We found it at the line of, I can't read the number, but Brian Mon's
Yeah.
field right
Yeah.
where main trunk is.
Yeah.
We did tile investigation and found it in between the pasture and Brian's field, and they know where it outletted, so we knew we had the elevation between where the field that says main trunk is and
Yep.
where the green line ends.
Okay.
So they will be digging up the old, so this is from the surface, digging up. You don't just come in and knife in
No.
a new tile.
We excavate.
Okay.
That'll be plastic, concrete, or plastic?
HDPE.
All right,
Okay, looks like a
Just
later
ask-
date then for me, so.
okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Anyone else care to comment? Please come up. Identify yourself and your address for the record.
Larry Rick, 26609 545th Avenue. I'm kind of speaking for my mother-in-law. She had knee surgery, so she's not here today. I would just like to say that I'm on the outlet side of it. And so over the years, first of all, this tile is over 100 years old. And I think it's had 0 maintenance in 100 years. So if you look at the red line and where that control structure is, So I've been married for, gotta think about this for a second.
When's your anniversary?
You best get it right.
It's easy, cause it was 2000,
Okay.
or, yeah. I'm an old bachelor, so it's hard to remember. Anyway, so in my married time to my wife and knowing my mother-in-law, that tile has receded into that our pasture probably about 30 feet in that length of time. And over their period of time of being on the farm for 74 years, it's probably receded about 150 feet where tile have collapsed and fallen in, and we've picked pieces out to maintain the structure. And I know Brian, the last time it did, Brian brought his backhoe over to take pieces out, and then if you just touch the tile, it breaks.
Little clay?
No,
Little
it's,
clay tile?
I think it's cement, but if you touch it,
Either way, you touch it,
bump with a
it
shovel,
falls
the
apart.
next piece breaks
Oh, yeah.
and falls in. So, what I wanna tell you about is, so it goes across our pasture, and then it goes into that woods after where the peak is, and it goes,
Right in here,
and then
Larry?
you can, yes, and then you can see the old line goes, it goes through the woods. Well, obviously they dug that in 1919, and there was no woods there. Well, there's cottonwood trees that are bigger around than this table that sit directly on top of it. And I know there's some washed out holes where you can see down to the tile, and there's roots. You couldn't crawl down to the tile, it's all full of roots, so I don't know how it even works. But, and I think down the road, being it's a county ditch, somebody's gonna have to replace it, and this would be the clear ticket to help out with that, where our assessments wouldn't be as high, and it wouldn't be such a burden to the county. And then, let's see, there's another point I wanted to point out, and I can't think of it now. Let me think for a second. If I think of it all.
Fine. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else care to comment?
Bruce Dickey, Acton Township. I just have one concern. I expect that and assume that the road will, our 545th will be returned to what it was when you cross it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, we're doing a project very similar to this in Sibley County right now, and our construction managers are working directly with our contractor and having the township on site to make sure, like, if this isn't great, if this grading doesn't work for you, let us know.
Okay.
And we'll make it look right to you
Okay.
guys.
I just wanted to get on record with that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bruce. One thing I haven't asked, that Grove Creek, does that have the capacity if now the hydraulic capacity to handle all
Yeah,
that?
well, in most of the events there that were analyzed by the petitioner, there's a decrease in the rate of water being delivered downstream because of that storage that's provided. There is a slight increase in the 100-year, like a 10% increase. You know, I think with the size of the drainage area of Grove Creek at that location and the relatively small size of the CD49 drainage area, there's really a negligible impact
Okay,
on
I
Grove
just,
Creek.
cause before we're dumping in the Long Lake, you got a big area to hold water and then slowly go down. I just wanna make sure that we've looked at that. All right. Anything else from?
I have a question. It says here, like, the green part is tile replacement, okay? But then what is in red, we call tile realignment. Explain the difference to me.
So
Tile replacement?
if I may, the green line would indicate the tiles being installed in the same alignment as it exists. The red line is in a new location, is the distinction there between the red and the green.
But they're all new tile,
That's
it's all
the
new
old
tile,
part, and this- But it'll be new.
it's all new,
Correct.
It'll, all of it will be new.
right.
Yeah, okay. 'Cause
They're just
replacement, realignment.
They're just rerouting it so that we're not going through all the trees and everything like that,
Okay.
just so that. Cause then you got the cost of the tree removal and then trees would likely start growing over the top of the tile again. You know, it makes, even if the county was doing a repair on the outlet end, I would actually propose to do a reroute like they're doing. It would only make sense to do that.
Trees and tile don't mix very
No,
well.
they don't.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just because I misspoke before, since the green line is using existing right of way, it's new tile, red line using a new alignment, those are the three properties that will have to grant easements as a condition of this. But for Mr. Larson's comment about, making sure his property is taken care of as part of the repair, one of the conditions proposed is, although we're not in charge of the contract, so we're not doing an acceptance hearing, that following the construction, there'd be an inspection and report by Mr. Lewis that those items were taken care of, construction was as predicted, and that we notice and hold a final hearing so that if there are concerns about this not being constructed to satisfaction, those could be addressed before too much time passes after initial construction.
This is quite a bit of distance here.
Of difference, correct. So the gray line is showing the existing right-of-way that the drainage system paid damages for and acquired at the time that the system was established. The red line will be the alignment for the new easements that will be negotiated and recorded prior to construction.
Why? Why
So-
not just continue to follow straight down into the lake and leave Grove Creek out of it?
That's a good question.
That'd be distance, and elevations. So there's more elevation in Grove Creek to, discharge at a lower elevation, and there's woods north of Grove Creek, or north of Long Lake also.
Is the property owner of that parcel present today?
No, they've deferred to their renter, both, that's in the Rimmel Trust, and then across the street was, I think Gail passed away, so it's Bev Peterson now, and they both have Franz Rosenquist as a renter, and we had a meeting with Brian and Franz, Mr. Rosenquist, a year or so ago, because as we've discussed, the main impacted agricultural components of this are Brian Mons fields on the west side, and then the stuff Mr. Rosenquist rents on the east side, and both those landowners, in addition to Larry's mother-in-law, they're on board with this project. Mr. Rosenquist, I mean, we sat down for probably 10 minutes, and he and Brian both agreed that this makes a lot of sense to do. He sees the benefits for what he tries to do, and from the Ducks Limited perspective, we see the benefit for the habitat stuff, but we've worked collaboratively with John and the ditch system on this, so like it's, a lot of times it's like an us versus them mentality, but we like finding opportunities like this where we can work together and everybody benefits.
Thank you.
All right, ma'am, if you'd identify yourself, please, and where you're at.
Martha Bloom, 26411 545th Avenue. And my question is, the green area that's listed there, is that where the standing water will be? Because I didn't imagine it to be that large. I realize it'll be draining from there, but is that where the standing water will be?
Is this elevation here, is that the 11.7,
Yeah.
is that the control structure height?
Yeah,
What's
so that's my
represented?
map, and when I just sketched that in around 1176 contour. And so that's my belief that the normal pool level will be about that footprint. I don't know if you have a different figure or map or way to describe that.
Or the design plans part of that, I think on the design plans, we have our surveyed elevation around that.
Okay, so these elevations are from, the remote elevation data, the LiDAR data, where I think, the project design plans would use some field survey, so that would be a more accurate version. The intent with this figure is just to give a visual of the approximate extent of the project.
This is proposed control structure water level
I
height.
think this is a little bit of an overestimate if I recall
Okay,
correctly.
but that's what's trying to be protected.
Yes.
So you're asking if this green part is going to be
No.
underwater?
No.
Is that your
This-
question?
no.
The
The whole
green- Just
thing.
this
If that's
green
the
part?
perimeter.
Is
The
that
lake.
green part going to be as large? Will it be half that size, a third the size?
Sir?
I have a
Just an
set of
idea.
construction plans on this dump drive if you wanna look at the actual surveyed data to show more accurate than that.
Sure.
There'll be more vegetation over time. I mean, you'll see 6 inches of water. There'll be cattails and everything. Yeah, the pool elevation will be in this edge, but you'll see vegetation.
So that cyan line is the actual outline with our survey data. It's very accurate.
You have to scroll, I think. So that image has it condensed in quite a bit from both the township road and the. I noted on Joe's map, he had his boundary touching into the trees on the west side, and that's kinda like what triggered me, because I don't think there's an easement under the trees on that west side, so. This is a little bit smaller than what Joe, that brings it further away from Bloom's house.
So it's more the dark color in there?
Yeah, the lighter blue color, yeah, that one right there.
That?
Yep.
It's
So there'll be
this
standing
light
water.
blue line,
Yep.
correct?
Standing water
Yep.
back to the, like the
That's-
lake level.
That's the 1176, which is what?
Depending on how much grass or vegetation is on the outside edge.
Yeah.
The outside edge will most likely be cattails, but the inside will be water in the next few years. Right away, it'll probably be all water, correct?
Yeah, my guess would be in all my experiences with wetlands, it's like, yeah, the first couple of years, you'll probably see water up to the edge, but that first foot of water depth, in 5 years, there'll be cattails and other vegetation. It's not usually until after that about foot and a half of water where you start to see open water or deeper. But once it's established, my guess is your open water will encroach in just once everything gets established.
That's with the assumption that we're gonna get rain again.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it looks the same.
Keep praying, yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yes.
Any,
Try to flood out your wildflowers.
We can get you a map.
We planted that, all the wildflowers for her, so.
She'll probably see more now, more wetland.
I'm Brian Mon, I'm the 4933 202nd Street applicant. I own the farmland most to the west there, and I'm all on board of it. I'm just wondering though, that green replacement tile, it doesn't show it on there, but that green stuff, who's paying for that? Is it, you're doing it too, so.
Yeah,
We
we
don't
can-
want any surprises for the ditch authority that, hey, that we're gonna be charged for that.
all right,
Yeah, our grant money is tied to permanently protected property. We consider a county held right away easement permanently protected, so we'll pay for the contracted cost of that.
anyone else from the public? Come on, Larry,
There you go.
Remember?
remembered your question.
Yeah.
Larry Rick, and my address I already stated. What I remember from Steve Erickson, who was the original Fish and Wildlife person that I talked to, and came out and walked it, and he looked back historically, and this lake, I believe, was 13 feet deep at its deepest point. So, to me, with flooding 2 or 3 feet in the middle of it, which is really flat, isn't gonna affect too many other things as you go upstream.
All right,
There's, the bottom of it's really flat and muddy, and as you go up, it's all sand beach covered with grass, and with all of it is, would have been 13 feet of water. It would have flooded Highway 4 and places to the west of Highway 4 even originally, so. Pretty much that road in the bottom right side would have been Lake Shore. And then all the way back around where you see the blue dotted line, that would have been all flooded. And then pretty much where all the topography lines are would have been, is the Lake Shore. This is a reference.
all right,
Thank you.
thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Public? All right, with that, we will close the public comment portion of the hearing. Does anybody from the board have any further questions? All right,
I notes and papers, questions all over the place, and I'm not real sure just how many of my questions have been addressed and answered here yet, but I'm, of course, concerned about who's going to pay for what. I'm concerned about if the tax issues will change for the property owners. Will the county have to pay for or collect any of these easements?
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Bredesen,
Yeah.
the proposal is that the petitioners have requested drainage system funds be used for the easement acquisition costs only. As a high estimate, I've said it would be rare in my experience that per parcel an easement would exceed $5,000. And so the proposal I'm making in the draft findings to the board is that the board commit drainage system funds equal to the cost of acquiring easements on those 3 properties not to exceed $15,000. That would be $5,000 per parcel. If it turns out it's only $10,000, that would be what the drainage system would be in for. The rest of the costs of these proceedings, your engineering fees, your attorney's fees, and the actual construction costs, those are all being paid for by Fish and Wildlife's project sponsor, Ducks Unlimited. So the most that the drainage authority, or the drainage system, I should say, would be on the hook for is the cost of drafting, getting signed, and getting recorded those easements on those 3 properties.
Okay, now I'm shocked by that. Why would we have to pay for an easement if the property owner is on board with the project?
So those costs are entirely my time in terms of drafting the easement, and then also the county recording fees for recording the easement. That's 100% of those costs. There's no proposal to provide payment to those landowners from the drainage system for those costs.
Okay.
The theory of the request for drainage system funds is that if this project was not approved, those tile lines that are being abandoned or repaired would need to be repaired, paid for by the system. Those costs would greatly exceed the costs of preparing, drafting, and recording these 3 easements.
Okay.
And Julie, I'll make one comment too, is, if this project weren't going to potentially happen, or if it was not happening, if we were to repair the tile and we were to do the reroute, we would need to go through the process of acquiring the easements for the new reroute anyway, if we were going to be doing it.
So this isn't a cost because of this project?
No.
Tile's in bad shape?
The tile's in bad shape.
Needs
If
to
we
be
were doing
addressed.
it, we would still need to go through that process, and
Okay.
it would still be a cost of the project.
Just to add some backing to that, so the county, we're asking the county to pick up the 15 grand, and I think our engineer's estimate for the project is somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000. So in a scenario where we're not involved, there's not a water control structure, but the cost would still exceed $500,000. I'm guessing that the ditch system would have to pick up.
Okay, now wait a minute now. That amount of money will not be it will not be burdened upon the property owners. The funds are coming from where?
We have grant money on hand that
Okay.
is going to allow us to pay for this, because if, as John was hinting at, if we're not paying for it, the system's gonna fail, and then the system has to pay for it.
Okay, because that amount of money just caused me to break out into a sweat a little bit.
Turn it into a good
That's
sweat.
700,000 or something.
So you can see then this is a good thing for the tax.
You
for-
bet.
Okay.
You bet. Okay,
Yeah, and let's say if the county, was replacing the outlet, at 3,000 feet, I mean, my rough estimate is you're probably looking at $200,000 just to replace the tile, let alone easement acquisition, and then probably redetermination of benefits on top of that. I mean,
okay.
it's a big benefit.
I'm getting a better grasp on this with my questions. Okay, so there hasn't been any exchange of purchasing of land. Current landowners, we're working with all those folks. So Ducks Unlimited hasn't purchased anything, Fish and Wildlife hasn't purchased anything, but we're all working together with current property owners.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Bredesen, Fish and Wildlife has already acquired an easement, not the property in fee, but an easement for the impound. That's the only change in property issues at this point.
All right. You getting there, Julie?
Yep.
All right.
Okay, I think I'm good.
Well, Kale, do you have any direction for us here?
Sure, so, Mr. Chair and members of the board, I did prepare some draft findings in an order. Based on what I was seeing from the engineer's report, it seems that your engineer has found that this project is of public or private benefit, and that landowners who are benefited by County Ditch 49 will not be deprived of those benefits if this project is constructed. So if it is okay with the board, I'm ready to review those draft findings in order that are in your board packet.
Absolutely.
Okay. The portions of the draft findings in order that are procedural, I'm just gonna make reference to, until we get down to the public hearing. But in the draft findings in order, I just have noted, initially, the Drainage Authority's role as the Drainage Authority with jurisdiction over County Ditch 49. In paragraph 2, just some history of the system. And then starting in paragraph 3, really borrowing the language from the petition. So if you've reviewed the petition, the next few findings are documenting what the petition asks this board to do. When we get down to paragraph 14, that just notes that initially the Drainage Authority's role was to accept the petition and appoint Joe Lewis as the engineer to develop a report. And then in the findings following paragraph 14, I've just noted that that report was prepared, it was filed, and then I've pulled comments from Mr. Lewis's report. Starting with, if you look at paragraph 21, I've documented there under the main trunk, lateral 1 and lateral 2, the exact proposed changes, so that there's a good record in County Ditch 49 records of what those changes were. In addition, Mr. Lewis's report and the Ducks Unlimited plans that will be in the drainage system records. I want to focus on really some of the two key findings, and then the order is probably unusually long for a project like this, but just because it involves some contingencies. So the two key findings for granting the petition are in paragraph 33, which is noting that the project is of public and private benefit. And I pulled those findings from the petition and the engineer's report, commenting that the project will provide new wildlife habitat, it will improve downstream water quality, it will increase temporary storage of floodwaters, and thereby decrease the burden on the downstream public drainage system. Both environmental and economic benefits pulled from the record. And then finally in paragraph 34, just noting the finding, which is supported by the engineer's report, stating that no benefited landowners on County Ditch 49 will have their drainage benefit impaired. Now, getting to the order, I propose the order to state that the petition will be granted, but that it's subject to the following conditions, which are in subparagraphs A through K. And these were contained in the presentation you just heard from Mr. Lewis when he said, here's my recommendations if you approve this petition. So, and I'll just note that these were shared with the petitioner to make sure that it had their support and that there was no objection to these contingencies as part of granting the petition. Subparagraph A just requires that the final plans and specifications before construction be shared with your engineer and your drainage inspector for final approval before we move forward to make sure there's no changes. Subparagraph B, it's the petitioner's burden to make sure that all required permits for constructing the project are obtained. Subparagraph C, it states that the petitioners must acquire all necessary right-of-way and flowage easements from owners of land to be affected by the project. Those must be obtained and recorded. You've already heard that for the impound, that easement has already been acquired several years ago. For the reroute, we will start work on that right-of-way if the petition is approved to make sure that those are signed by those landowners and recorded before construction begins. I've talked to petitioners that if this is approved today, I would draft those, share those with the petitioners and their drainage inspector and engineer, and then once it meets their approval, send it out to the landowners for review. They would need to voluntarily sign it before we can move forward. Paragraph D specifies that same comment, but specifically for the realigned tile. So for the outlet control structure, the landowners will be giving the right to the drainage authority to inspect, repair, and maintain those features moving forward. Subparagraph, E is the one that references the Butler Lake outlet control structure. As Mr. Lewis mentioned, subparagraph F requires the petitioners to televise